Well, thank you all, and this is a great place for us to meet because this is the house the children's books built. We're here in this auditorium and in this building because of the greatness of the books that we were lucky enough to publish, sell, distribute, and support. So this environment, the people in it, who have much more to do with the success of Scholastic than I do, all are dedicated to children's reading, children's imagination. So this is a great spot for us to work with the Frankfurt Book Fair and Thomas Minkus, who is in the back, on another of their very important contributions to publishing, which is, helping us define who we are in our profession and figuring out, more ways for us to learn about what we do. So we're really very happy to work with Frankfurt Book Fair to bring you this first ever children's book publishing forum. And I know that Thomas and his colleagues want to internationalize this, as Ed said, so we hope that this will be the first of many. We're moved today to acknowledge the deaths of Leo Dillon and Ellen Levine, who just passed away over the weekend. But as I think about the topic of today, I think of this in an optimistic way, because both of them, created books that were great and which will live on beyond their lives. So in a way, it's a fitting thing for us to project forward, thinking about the two of them that had contributed so much, and of course recently we're all recovering from the death of Maurice, who was one of the true greats of children's literature, as I'm sure we would all agree. I'm going to start by taking, instead of going forward into the digital world, taking you back in time a little bit, because it's as we think about what makes a children's book great, one of the things that sticks out in my mind is, and I don't think everybody really understands this, so I'm going to go into it in one paragraph of detail. When Scholastic first brought children's book clubs into the schools in the late 1940s, there were very few children's books in the world. There were great books that were in libraries. There were a few that were in upscale homes and in a few high-quality bookstores that were in Boston, New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. But children's books were not visible. They weren't available. They weren't in children's lives. And really only the well-to-do had access to children's books. So that's so different from the world we live in today. But when you think about the history of children's books and how they were made and who they were made for, I think it's relevant. So when Scholastic first brought book clubs into schools, it was the time when in the adult world there were 25 and 35-cent paperbacks in drugstores, and the first real expansion of books in the United States into the consumer market. And the publishers really had a few ill-fated ventures into children's books at that time, but nothing sold because parents and people weren't really used to going into bookstores or drugstores to find children's books, and children's books were very little known. By offering books through schools where all the kids were, first at the junior high or middle school level in the 40s, then in the 50s in the upper elementary, in the 60s in the lower elementary schools, we helped precipitate a widespread market for children to own their own books, to have their 25-cent books that they could take home and call their own. And the publishers responding to this then both published for us and also started to publish a little more broadly for bookstores, and eventually, although first they licensed their children's classics to paperback publishers, Then they started issuing their own trade paperbacks probably in the 70s. So, but the popularization and availability of children's books was something that happened from, say, 1950 and very slowly until the 1980s, when it really grew dramatically in the United States. And until then, it really, kids had more and more increasing availability of books, but they still were available mainly in schools and through schools to homes. And so the world that we live in today is quite different from the world that we were in for many, many years of the children's book, of the life of children's books. The gatekeepers at that time were primarily librarians, and the originators were a small number of brilliant children's book editors working with a few authors and artists like Robert McCloskey, Margaret Wise Brown, and so forth. And it was not a mass business until probably the 60s and the 70s. Another important factor here was that the clubs and school and fairs gave children the chance to choose their own books. And so what interested them was really quite different from what interested the librarian market. And our own Clifford, which is celebrating its 50th anniversary, was rejected by every hardcover publisher and every sort of librarian-oriented publisher, as almost all the great hardcover publishers of that day were, because it was too cartoony and it didn't look like serious reading or great art. And so, but when we got Clifford and made it available to kids, suddenly they loved its artlessness and its simplicity and its connection and closeness to them. Now, is that a great children's book? We'll leave you to help decide that, but it's very, the children choosing their own books changed the way children's books were pictured. I go into this history because it bears on my definition of what makes a children's book great. And I'll instead of ending by answering the question, I'll start by saying, I would say that a great children's book is one which, at this moment, is making a child so connected to a picture or a story that the child brings that book into their heart and mind because it ignites a connection to a feeling or an idea that becomes all important to that child. This means that a wide variety of children's books can be great because they can touch a child and bring alive an important idea or feeling. So that's my answer to the question. Okay, good job. Anybody else that could, hold your applause? Okay, thank you. Your own answer to this question, you might come at this idea by simply reviewing what the words great children's books bring alive in your mind, right? My guess is that it will immediately bring you to books that have endured, that have had wide circulation, that have won prizes and are broadly known. And you are probably thinking, also from your own childhood, what you love, but you're probably thinking Where the Wild Things Are, Goodnight Moon, perhaps The Carrot Seed, or A Hole Is to Dig, Catherine Patterson, J.K. Rowling, Suzanne Collins, but most likely there is a relatively narrow list of books in your head which you would call great. Our Scholastic polls on this topic are most likely to include To Kill a Mockingbird, Harry Potter, and perhaps Maurice Sendak. But if you ask a broad segment of people the question, what makes a children's book great, you will get Richard Scarry, Where's Waldo, Captain Underpants, Arthur, board books, alphabet books, informational books like the ones from DK, early ones, or Usborne, Magic School Bus. You will get joke books and mysteries like Goosebumps, romances, and friendship stories such as Babysitter's Club, because to somebody at the right moment, these books were great because they grabbed you and brought you into their world. Okay, more broadly, if you're 6 to 18 months old, your great book might be our board book multicultural series called Babies, which show babies' faces smiling. They're fascinating for about 6 months of your life. And you love to look at these, and you see yourself in them, and you smile when you see the smiling baby. These are multicultural for sure, because there are no words, and there's no language, and so you see different global faces. So if you were asking the question 60 years ago, the answer might be Catcher in the Rye or Pippi Longstocking, and if you're asking it today, it might be Rick Riordan or The Wimpy Kid. So my answer is that you must define children's books very broadly and must allow, and should allow, or can allow, this is a question anybody can have the right answer to, for the great variety of stories and ideas that can change the way a child looks at the world. There are certain characteristics, in my mind, of great books for children. First, the idea is likely to be simple and original and presented with extreme clarity and visual simplicity and power. In this area, I think of The Carrot Seed, A Hole is to Dig, Swimmy, Goodnight Moon, Maurice Sendak, Anything Of, and a host of others. Second, the book somehow connects with the reader, assembling its world effortlessly in the reader's mind and makes you an immediate part of the story. In this area, I think of how Joe Rowling made every child feel that he or she was Harry Potter. And Dickens makes you feel you're Pip or David Copperfield. It's just the way that you connect, the way she or he brought you into the story that makes you feel that you are that character, and that character is you. And that drags you along because you want to find out who you are going to become. Third, a great book makes the world seem larger and more interesting and with infinite possibilities. I'll talk a little bit, cite a few nonfiction. I think of the initial impact of DK books with their visual power. You all probably know the recent book on the elements, which if you look at that, you just think of the world in a completely different way. Fourth, I think humor and a light touch is incredibly important to children, and so we get great books, Captain Underpants, Wimpy Kid, joke books of all kinds. They're the same jokes that have been recycled for 50 years. They get sent back and forth between kids, but they're to a kid who is in love with that joke, that's a great book for that moment. And in a different way, Dr. Seuss. Another characteristic might be the realization of a complete but very different world, such as Alice in Wonderland, Roald Dahl, Stuart Little, or the dystopian books so popular now. But each of these touches an emotional chord because the people are recognizable even in strange settings. And finally, every great book brings forth an emotional response, a sense of identity, a sense that I could be that person or that character, even if that person is in the form of an animal or a dragon or a knight or someone very different from who you are. And I think of many series of which we're very proud of, completely realized worlds of animals or people, but they can be very different, but they're completely realized and take up a great spot in your mind, but bringing forth a tremendous emotional response. So my appeal to you is to look broadly at the children's book industry and celebrate the whole diversity of answers to the question, what makes a children's book great? Now, since I look backward, I will look forward and feel that the audiovisual impact of ebooks is going to open up a completely broader world. The challenge will be to maintain that sense of quality, clarity, focus, emotional connection, but the availability of books in all these different formats that can come right into your lives at this very second by the press of a button is going to bring a powerful expansion of children's books and children's content. But all the great ones will all do those 5 things that I think the great books in print have done, over the past 60 years. So thank you for a chance to talk about this. I look in the audience here at David Levitan and Rosemary Stamola and many of the other people who are on the panel. I know that this question is going to get larger and more important and more variegated and more interesting as the day goes on. But I thank everybody for assembling around this major topic, and thank you all for coming to Scholastic to listen to what makes a children's book great. Thank you so much.